Most people spend their entire life thinking about everyone except themselves. They pour their energy into pleasing others, chasing approval, fitting into expectations, and then wonder why they feel empty, drained, and disconnected from their purpose. Today, I want to flip that script, because the moment you start thinking about yourself, your growth, your boundaries, your peace, your goals, everything in your life begins to shift. When you make why you a priority, your entire world recalibrates. And if you're ready to finally choose yourself, this is the message you needed to hear. When you hear the phrase, think about yourself, a lot of people instantly label it as selfish, but that reaction comes from conditioning, not truth. You were raised to believe that your value comes from how much you do for others, how much you sacrifice, how much you give. And somewhere along the way, you learn to put yourself last, as if your needs didn't matter, as if your voice wasn't as important, as if your well-being was optional. But here's the reality most people never learn: thinking about yourself is the foundation of every strong, healthy, fulfilled, and empowered life. It's not selfish, it's survival, it's alignment. It's the only way you can live fully instead of just existing on autopilot. When you stop for a moment and really look at your life, you'll notice how often you've betrayed yourself for the sake of convenience, approval, or peacekeeping. You say yes to avoid conflict. You take responsibility for other people's emotions. You silence your own desires to avoid disappointing someone. You shrink so others feel comfortable. Those patterns don't come from strength. They come from neglecting yourself for so long that you've forgotten what it means to put your own needs first. You've forgotten that you deserve to be considered too. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to have your needs prioritized, not as an afterthought, but as a standard. The moment you start thinking about yourself, everything changes. You begin to understand that your mental energy is finite. You don't have an endless supply. Every yes you give someone else is a no you're giving to yourself. And when you constantly choose others at the expense of your inner peace, you become drained, resentful, and disconnected from your purpose. But thinking about yourself intentionally, unapologetically, gives you permission to replenish your energy instead of constantly leaking it into places where it never returns. This shift doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you care for yourself so deeply that you stop abandoning your own needs in the process. You begin to show up in relationships from a place of wholeness instead of exhaustion. You start giving because you want to, not because you feel obligated. You begin to draw clearer lines between what is yours to carry and what isn't. Thinking about yourself isn't a rejection of others, it's an acceptance of your own worth. And when you think about yourself, you start paying closer attention to the signals your body and mind send you, the burnout you've been ignoring, the stress you've been swallowing, the emotional heaviness you've been absorbing, the lack of boundaries you've allowed. You start noticing when you feel drained. You start noticing when someone's presence tightens your chest. You start noticing when a situation lowers your energy or when a relationship constantly demands more than it gives. Thinking about yourself means you stop dismissing these signals and start honoring them. This is the moment where you learn to choose yourself even when it's uncomfortable, even when it creates distance, even when others don't understand. Thinking about yourself means you stop performing for others and start aligning with what feels right for you. Maybe that means walking away from certain people. Maybe that means taking a risk others don't believe in. Maybe it means saying no to what you've always said yes to. It's not selfish, it's self-preservation. And the truth is, people who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always call your self-focus selfish. But you cannot live your life according to the expectations of people who only see value in what you do for them. The goal is not to be endlessly available. The goal is to be authentic, aligned, and intentional. When you think about yourself, you stop over-giving, over-explaining, over-apologizing. You stop negotiating your peace. You stop betraying your values. You start operating from clarity instead of fear. Every time you choose yourself, you strengthen the belief that you matter. You train your mind to understand that your needs have weight, your feelings deserve respect, and your dreams are worth pursuing. You become more grounded, more self-aware, more confident. You become someone who no longer tolerates being treated as an option because you finally treat yourself as a priority. And once you do that, your entire world shifts. The people who truly value you stay. The people who only valued your sacrifice fade. The opportunities that align with your growth appear. Your energy becomes more powerful. Your life becomes more intentional. And suddenly you realize that thinking about yourself was never selfish. It was the beginning of becoming who you were meant to be. Because at the end of the day, you either choose yourself or you lose yourself. Protecting your energy is one of the most powerful forms of self-respect you can practice, yet it's something most people never learn to do. They wake up every day and hand out pieces of themselves without even realizing it. They give their attention to distractions, their emotions to drama, their time to people who drain them, and their focus to things that don't matter. They run around exhausted, overwhelmed, and frustrated, trying to understand why life feels heavy. But the truth is simple: when you don't protect your energy, the world will take everything you have, and it won't feel sorry for doing it. Every interaction, every commitment, every conversation, every decision either fuels you or drains you. And when you're not thinking about yourself first, you don't notice the slow leaks that are wearing you down. You don't notice how drained you feel after certain people talk to you. You don't notice how your mood changes after scrolling social media for too long. You don't notice how saying yes to everything leaves you burned out at the end of the week. You don't notice how constantly fixing other people's problems leaves you with no energy to fix your own. Protecting your energy starts with becoming aware of what pulls from you and what pours into you. And this awareness shifts everything. You begin realizing that your peace is not something you should be negotiating. You start becoming intentional with where your time goes. You stop feeling guilty for wanting space. You stop apologizing for needing rest. You begin setting boundaries not to push people away, but to keep yourself whole. Protecting your energy isn't about building walls, it's about choosing what gets access to you. Not everything deserves your attention, not every conversation deserves your response, and not every relationship deserves your effort. When you start thinking about yourself, you notice that some people only come to you to offload their negativity, their stress, their chaos. And for a long time, maybe you thought it was your responsibility to help, to listen, to fix, to absorb. But it was never your job to carry the emotional weight of everyone around you. Protecting your energy means understanding that being supportive does not mean being drained. It means you can care without sacrificing yourself in the process. You can love people without letting them exhaust you. You can be there for others without disappearing in the process. And it's not just people, it's habits too. Protecting your energy means looking at how you start your day, what you consume, what you allow into your mind, and what patterns are quietly draining you. You begin to realize that your mornings set your tone, your environment shapes your mood, and your habits either lift you higher or pull you backward. You start removing things that create noise inside your mind. You start cutting back on the small habits that steal your attention. You start choosing routines that ground you instead of routines that scatter your focus. There will be people who don't like the new you, the version of you that says no without explanation, the you that draws boundaries, the you that protects your peace. And that resistance from others is often the biggest challenge. You might feel guilty. You might feel selfish. You might feel like you're letting people down. But you're not. You are simply choosing to stop letting yourself down. You're choosing to stop abandoning yourself for the sake of convenience. You're choosing to stop carrying burdens that were never yours. Protecting your energy is an act of courage because it requires you to value your own well-being even when others don't. Once you start doing it, something incredible happens. Your mind feels clearer, your life feels lighter, your emotions feel calmer. You start responding instead of reacting. You begin to attract people who respect your boundaries instead of pushing against them. You start creating a life where you don't constantly feel overwhelmed. You feel more connected to your inner voice, your intuition, your goals. When you protect your energy, you make space for the right opportunities, the right relationships, the right growth. You make space for yourself. And the people who truly value you will understand. They'll appreciate your boundaries because they've learned to create their own. They'll respect your space because they understand what it takes to maintain inner peace. They'll support your growth because they want you to thrive. Protecting your energy doesn't push the right people away, it reveals them. This isn't about isolating yourself from the world. It's about choosing how you engage with it. It's about deciding what deserves access to you. It's about choosing not to be drained by things that don't align with the person you're becoming. At the end of the day, protecting your energy is how you protect your future. It's how you stay aligned with your purpose. It's how you stay connected to yourself. Because when you protect your energy, you protect your power. When you start thinking about yourself, one of the biggest shifts you'll ever experience is realizing that your growth matters more than the opinions around you. For most of your life, you've been influenced, directly or indirectly, by what people think. Family, friends, coworkers, society, everyone has an opinion about who you should be, what you should do, what choices you should make, and how you should live. And without even noticing it, you absorb those opinions. You internalize them. You make decisions based on what will keep people comfortable instead of what will move you forward. You shrink dreams to avoid criticism. You play it safe because you don't want to be judged. You stay where you are because someone might not approve of where you're going. But here's the truth that frees you: people's opinions are not facts. They are reflections of their own fears, their own limitations, their own worldview. And none of those things should dictate the direction of your life. When you begin choosing your growth, you stop living according to the expectations of people who don't have to live with the consequences of your choices. You start living for yourself instead of constantly performing for an invisible audience that will never be satisfied. Thinking about yourself means you give yourself permission to grow even when others don't see the vision. It means you get comfortable disappointing people if it means staying true to who you are becoming. Growth is uncomfortable. It forces you to step into unfamiliar territory, to let go of old habits, to set boundaries, to say no, to take risks. And when you do that, some people won't like it. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because your growth highlights the areas where they're staying the same. Your change disrupts their comfort. Your progress challenges their excuses. But you cannot dim your potential to protect someone else's comfort. You cannot stay small because someone else is scared to see you rise. You cannot sacrifice your purpose to maintain relationships that depend on your stagnation. When you prioritize your growth, you start breaking cycles of people pleasing, cycles of self-doubt, cycles of settling, cycles of ignoring your own voice. And breaking those cycles requires you to stop letting opinions steer your path. You begin asking yourself questions you probably haven't asked in years. What do I want? What matters to me? What feels aligned with my future? What dreams have I buried because I was afraid of being judged? And when you answer those questions honestly, you realize how much of your life has been shaped by fear instead of intention. But this time, you choose differently. You choose to listen to the voice inside you instead of the noise around you. People will always have something to say. They'll call you unrealistic for dreaming big. They'll call you selfish for choosing yourself. They'll call you changed when you stop tolerating what you used to. But that's exactly the point. You are changing. You are evolving. You are becoming the version of yourself that isn't held back by external expectations. And the people who matter will respect that. They'll support your growth because they're growing too. The ones who try to hold you back are simply revealing their own limitations. Prioritizing your growth over opinions doesn't mean you stop listening to others entirely. It means you stop letting their judgment dictate your actions. It means you take feedback from people who have built something, not from people who never tried. It means you listen to mentors, not critics. It means you trust your intuition over the fear of being misunderstood. Because the truth is, most people don't even understand themselves, so how could they possibly understand your journey? When you start choosing growth, you begin stepping into opportunities that once scared you. You start embracing the parts of yourself you used to hide. You start investing in your own evolution, your mindset, your habits, your boundaries, your goals. You begin building momentum that no one can take from you. And that momentum becomes your protection. It becomes your focus. It becomes your identity. Some people will talk, but talking is easy. Growth is not. Talking requires nothing, but evolving requires courage, discipline, and a willingness to let go. So choose the harder path. Choose the path that leads somewhere. Choose the path that requires you to think bigger, act boldly, and trust yourself even when others don't. Because the people who judge you now will eventually admire you later. The same voices that doubt you today will one day use your name as an example of what's possible. That's what happens when you choose yourself, and in the end, what matters most is not who doubted you, but how you chose to rise anyway. Because when you prioritize your growth, you prioritize your future. There comes a moment in your life when you have to ask yourself a very real question: am I building a life that actually feels good on the inside, or am I just creating one that looks good from the outside? Because there's a huge difference between the image you present to the world and the truth you carry within yourself. Too many people spend their lives performing, chasing external admiration, collecting achievements, buying things they don't need, trying to look successful, trying to look happy, trying to look like they have it all figured out. But deep down, they feel disconnected, unfulfilled, and empty. And the reason is simple. When you stop thinking about yourself and live only for the outside world, you abandon your inner world completely. Thinking about yourself means you stop choosing image over alignment. You stop living for validation and start living for meaning. You stop chasing things that impress people and start building habits that impress your future self. It's about choosing a life that nourishes you, not one that drains you but looks pretty on the surface. And that shift begins with honesty. Real, uncomfortable honesty. The kind that forces you to admit what isn't working, what doesn't feel right, what's been ignored for too long. It's the honesty that invites you to rebuild your life from the inside out instead of the outside in. You start recognizing that external success means nothing if it doesn't match your internal peace. You can have the job, the followers, the money, the attention, and still feel lost. You can achieve every goal society tells you to aim for and still feel like something is missing. That something is usually you, your desires, your purpose, your authenticity, your boundaries, your emotional well-being. When you think about yourself, you create a life where your inner world becomes the priority, not an afterthought buried under responsibilities and expectations. And that's when you begin choosing differently. You start choosing relationships that feel safe, not just relationships that look good on social media. You choose routines that make you stronger mentally and physically, not routines that impress other people. You choose environments that elevate you, not the ones you stay in just because they look successful from the outside. You choose conversations that grow you, not conversations that drain your identity. You choose opportunities that align with your purpose, not the ones that only offer status. There's a deep calm that comes with living in alignment, a sense of clarity you don't get when you're performing for the world. When your life feels good internally, you stop competing, you stop comparing, you stop feeling behind. You stop feeling like you need to prove something. You begin to move through life at your own pace, grounded in who you are instead of who others want you to be. You understand that true fulfillment doesn't come from applause, it comes from authenticity. And the more you build your life internally, the more the external world naturally aligns. When your inner world is cared for, your outer world reflects it. Your relationships become healthier because you show up whole. Your decisions become clearer because they come from a place of truth instead of fear. Your goals become more meaningful because they're guided by your values instead of expectations. Your success becomes more sustainable because it's rooted in something real, not something fragile. But choosing a life that feels good internally requires courage. It requires letting go of the need to be understood by everyone. It requires being okay with disappointing people who only like the version of you that performed for them. It requires walking away from environments that only valued you for what you produced, not who you are. It requires rebuilding habits, beliefs, and routines that have kept you stuck in cycles that don't serve your growth. It also requires slowing down enough to hear your own voice. The world tries to distract you constantly through comparison, through pressure, through unrealistic expectations. But thinking about yourself means you pause, you reflect, you ask yourself what you truly want, not what you think you're supposed to want. You make space for stillness so your truth can speak. And once you hear that inner voice clearly, it becomes impossible to go back to a life that only looks good externally. Because here's the beautiful part: when you choose a life that feels good inside, you stop chasing temporary highs. You start valuing long-term fulfillment. You no longer need to prove your worth because you feel it. You no longer seek approval because you approve of yourself. You no longer need validation because you are rooted in your own truth. That's when your life becomes yours again, not a performance, not a facade, not a mask, but an honest reflection of who you truly are. And when you reach that point, something shifts permanently because you realize that the life that feels good on the inside will always outshine the one that only looks good on the outside. Here is a powerful, fast conclusion for your full speech, written in the same tone and flow as the rest of the segments. Emotional, direct, and deeply motivating, just just like a live speech delivery. When you really look at your life, you'll notice that every major shift, every breakthrough, every moment of real growth has come from one thing: the moment you finally chose yourself. Not because it was easy, not because it was convenient, but because it was necessary. And that's the message I want you to leave with today. Your life will only change when you stop waiting for someone else to choose you, validate you, understand you, or approve of you, and you decide to choose yourself fully and unapologetically. You don't need permission to protect your energy. You don't need approval to grow. You don't need applause to follow your own path. You don't need anyone's acceptance to build a life that feels good on the inside. You just need to make one decision: that you matter, that your voice matters, that your peace, your purpose, your future, your dreams all matter. And once you make that decision, your entire world begins to shift. You stop settling. You stop shrinking. You stop tolerating things that drain you. You stop being available to everything that distracts you from who you're becoming. You start moving with intention. You start showing up with power. You start living from a place of alignment instead of survival. And the truth is, no one can make that shift for you. No one can set those boundaries for you. No one can walk your path. No one can build your inner world. That responsibility, that privilege belongs to you alone. And yes, it will feel uncomfortable at times. Yes, some people won't understand. Yes, choosing yourself will challenge you to let go of old patterns, old versions of you, and sometimes even old relationships. But every time you choose yourself, you step deeper into the life you were meant to live. So listen, if there is one thing you take from this entire message, let it be this: A, you are allowed to prioritize yourself. You are allowed to think about yourself always. Not as an act of selfishness, but as an act of self-honor. You deserve a life that feels aligned, peaceful, purposeful, and real. You deserve a life where you're not constantly drained, overlooked, or controlled by the expectations of others. You deserve to be the main character in your own story. And the moment you finally decide to choose yourself, you'll realize something powerful. You were never asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong people. Now you're asking yourself, and this time you're saying yes, because the life you want begins the moment you choose you.